Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to Network Tech Zone. In the previous video, we have configured OSPF. I have given the link of the video in the description box for your reference. In this video, we will understand the election process between the designated router and the backup designated router in OSPF. So we know that in an OSPF broadcast network, the OSPF elects one router to act as a designated router, nothing but your DR, okay, and another router on the segment to act as a backup designated router, nothing but the BDR. Okay, so by the help of this election process, we will be able to minimize the amount of repetitive information that is forwarded on our network. So let us understand why the backup designated router is elected first in our OSPF. So if we have two or more routers, and if they're having a tie, that is, if they have the same highest priority. So the tiebreaker is the router which is sending the hello packets with the highest router ID. So in this topology, if we consider that if all this router have got their default priority value of 1, so the highest physical IP address that we see here is 10.1.1.4, which is going to be the highest router ID. So this R4 that you see here, this is going to be a designated router. And the second highest, which is 10.1.1.3, is going to be a backup designated router. So let's go ahead and configure the IP address first. And this topology that you see here has got area 0, which is our backbone area, and single network, which is 10.1.1.0 with /24, out of which we will assign .1 on router 0, .2 on router 1, .3 on router 2, and .4 on router 4. Okay, let's go ahead and assign the IP address on the router 0. So enable configure terminal. Let's rename this. I will say router 0. Okay. IP. Okay, it looks like router. Oh, there. Host name router R0. Okay. And IP address. IP address is going to be for our interface. Gigabit port 0/0. Okay, and IP address that we can assign is 10.1.1.1 with /24 for the subnet mask. No shut. Okay, we can see the interface has been changed to status up. And let's go to R1. Let us rename it. Enable configure terminal, host name R1, interface gigabit port 0/0, and you can see IP address, which is 10.1.1.2 with /24 for the subnet mask, and no shut. The interface is turned to green. Let's go to router R2. Okay, on the R2, we need to give it a name here. Okay. Enable configure terminal, interface gigabit port 0/0, IP address 10.1.1.3, 255.255.255.0. Okay, no shut. That, and you can see it's turned to green. We also need to give the host name. So configure terminal, host name R2. Let's go to R4 and rename that. Host name R4. Interface gigabit port 0/0. IP address 10.1.1.4 255.255.255.0 and no shell. Okay. So now you have all the interfaces turned on. We will now go ahead and create OSPF. So let us go to router 0. Configure terminal. Router OSPF 1. The only network which we see here is 10.1.1.0. So let's take 10.1.1.0 and wildcard mask for /24. Area is 0 and Control Z, and I will just copy this. Okay, and I'll give the same network for all the other 3 routers that we see. So let's go to router 1, configure terminal, router OSPF 1. I'll just paste it over here because they're all in the same network. You can see they're forming the neighborhood. So if you say show IP OSPF neighbor, you can see there is a BDR and a DR election happening. Okay. So let's configure on the router 2. Configure terminal, router OSPF 1. And paste it. The adjacency is getting formed. Show IP OSPF neighbor. It's choosing the DR and the BDR. Okay. Let's configure OSPF on the router 4. Configure terminal, router OSPF area 1. I'll just paste it over here. It's still saying two-way DR other. Let's just wait for the election to happen. Okay, now the DR is selected for 2, and the BDR is still the 1.1. Let's just give some time. And if in case if there was any stale sessions, you might still see the lowest IP address is going to be your DR or a BDR when 10.1.1.4 is supposed to be your designated router. So if that is how you see the output with the lowest router ID is showing to be your DR, just clear the process ID, okay? So clear IP OSPF process. It says yes. And it's going to start the election. I'll do the same over here. Let's check. It will take some time, but clear IP OSPF process, yes. Clear IP OSPF process. And same thing on this router. So this is like initiating the fresh election again. Okay, now let's just check. Go to router 0 and say show IP or OSPF neighbor. So the second highest is chosen as a backup designated router, and the highest priority is given over to the highest router address. So that one which has got the highest router ID is elected as a designated router, which is 10.1.1.4, which is this router. So R4 is designated router. Okay. And if you see the backup designated router, that's the second highest, which is 1.3. So this router that you see is elected as a backup designated router. Okay. And the status for this is neither by a DR nor a BDR, and hence it's going to be called as a DR other. Okay. So if you want to verify, you can just go to this router. I'll go to the backup designated router. And if you say show IP OSPF neighbor, you can see the DR, the designated router with highest priority, of course. But you see the 1.1, which is this R0, and 1.2, which is R1. So these two are going to be remained as a DR other, since they are neither a designated router nor a backup designated router. So here, if you see the priority, they're all having the highest priority. That is, there is a tie in the priority, and hence the highest router ID was the winner. What if I would like to convert this D or other to act like a designated router? In that case, I will have to change this priority. Okay, priority to maybe I'll change it to 5. And if I do that, since this is going to have the highest priority, and the rest of the others will have the default priority as 1. So this is going to be the winner. Okay, so this is going to be my designated router. Okay, and to elect the backup designated router, there is a tie between the DR1, DR2, and DR4. So this is then going to become the BDR, because this has got the highest priority, right? BDR. Okay, so this is what we want to verify. Let's just go ahead and change the priority on this router. Okay, so let's go on the router 0, configure terminal, interface gigabit port 0/0, router IP or OSPF priority, and I'll give the priority is 5. Okay, that's it. Show IP or OSPF neighbor. It's not showing its own IP address because it's not the neighbor. So yes, so these are all the neighbor. right? So it's just going to show us the neighbor address. That's what you see here. So these are all our neighbor address, and this is the router address of the neighbors. Okay, neighbor ID. Now, to check the priority here, you can just go to this router. Okay, the router 2. So on the router 2, show IP OSPF neighbor. You may still see the old one because we have to remove the stale session and the election needs to take place because they're using packet tracer and sometimes so the functionalities are limited. So let's just go ahead and clear the old process ID, the old stale running process. So I'll just say clear IP OSPF process. I'll just say yes. Do the same thing on this. Clear IP OSPF process. I'll say yes. And the same thing over here. Clear IP OSPF process. Say yes. And same thing over here. Here. Okay. Now let's check. We'll go on this router 2, show IP OSPF neighbor. Now you can see the 10.1.1.1, which was the day or other, with the status D or other, is now the designated router because the priority is higher than the other 3 routers. Okay, and of course, since there was a tie between R1, R2, and R4, the highest router ID is going to be the winner. So this is going to be a backup designated router, and that's what you have seen here. 10.1.1.4 is a BDR, okay? And you can verify even from this router, show IP or OSPF neighbor. So no matter in any router, you have the same result. So DR, we have full. The DR router is 10.1.1.4. I mean 10.1.1.1, which is the router 0, okay? And your BDR is 10.1.1.4. And these are all just the router ID of your neighbors. And that's all about the process of DR and the BDR election in OSPF. I hope that this video has been informative to you all. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you for watching. See you in the next video.